So water, I mean, if we think about energy and we think about CO2 and climate change, I mean, you've got to think about water in the coming years, in the coming decade. In the coming decade, I think it's going to be the oil of our time. First, how do we get it? This is a beetle called the Namibian beetle. Gets water out of air. There's a lot of water in humidity, in humid climates. There's a lot of water in fog. We tend to put a straw in the earth and suck on that, but we tend to forget about this water in air technology. This is a beetle that has bumps on it, puts its, as you see, it's like doing a headstand, and it combs water out of fog with a very special chemistry on those tips. The tips are water-loving. They're like a magnet for that fog. And then the sides of the bumps are waxy. And so water rolls, when the ball of water gets big enough, it rolls down. Now, architects and material scientists are beginning to put this on buildings. So you can imagine a building in a foggy area collecting its own water at its upper levels, wrapped in a skin that has this pattern on it. It's 10 times better for capturing fog water than the nets in Chile. There's a company called Pax Water that uses the same spiral shapes that you see everywhere in the natural world. Believe it or not, nobody's used them in fans. Nobody's used them in water mixers. This is a water mixer that, on the energy it takes for a 25-watt light bulb, can circulate 1 million gallons of water in a water storage tank. You circulate that water, you don't have to use as much chlorine to keep it all clean. Let's talk about living tissue now, because that's an element too. Green chemistry is a field that I'm really excited about. And I'm working with some green chemists right now as a biologist sitting at their design table, finding the organisms that do the chemical reactions that the chemists want to learn about. And then they mimic those chemical reactions. Life knows how to preserve. The rest of life needs to defend itself against bacteria as well. This is a tardigrade. Again, the lowest of the low are the ones that teach us. The tardigrade is, I mean, that's blown up thousands of times. That organism can dry out almost completely and be in a preserved state for a couple of hundred years. And then add water, same way with that fern. It can stay dry for months, and then you add water. Two companies, Cambridge Biostability and Biomatrica, they found a way to borrow the recipe of the tardigrade and wrap it around vaccines. You say, well, so to preserve them, to preserve the vaccines. That is instead of putting refrigerators everywhere. Half of the people who are supposed to get vaccines do not get them. 50% never get the vaccine because there's a break in the refrigeration between lab and village. Now, this little guy could inspire, or has inspired, that company has to spread its product, has inspired a way to have that vaccine preserved without refrigeration. Imagine what that could do for the food industry. Here's a way to repel bacteria without chemicals. This is the Galapagos shark, and that second photo down is the shape of its scales. It's at a very small level. Those ripples do not allow bacteria to get a foothold. So a company called Sharklet Technologies is making a film for doorknobs, handles, bed rails in hospitals to keep bacteria from settling so that we don't have to use as many antibiotics or cleansers. Here's, most leaves are self-cleaning. It's only when we look at them very closely do we see these little bumps. And then on top of the bumps, there's a ball of water. The dirt particles teeter on the bumps. The ball of water rolls off and picks up the dirt particles. It's called the lotus effect. There's all kinds of things. There's building facade paints with the lotus effect, and roofing tiles, and cement, and glass. And rainwater cleans the building. So it's not a matter of reformulating detergents. It's a matter of figuring out how structure can help you stay clean. You know, all of these individual technologies, what happens is we go into a company, and then the company says, well, okay, you've helped us solve that problem, but could nature help us behave more like a forest? Could nature help a company reorganize itself to be more sustainable, to be more resilient? And so we're asked to come and start to talk about how ecosystems work and what are life's principles. In other words, what do all organisms have in common? And we call them life's principles. That's a really interesting part of our work. You can't quite see these. There's lots of life principles. We break them down into 6 principles, and then there's subsets of those. It's really, really fun to be a biologist teaching executives. So in this case, we're a biologist in the boardroom. We've also been working on city urban planning, believe it or not. People say, okay, I get it that you can make self-cleaning glass. But can you make a city generous? I'll finish about the city here. So here's Manhattan, and here's what Manhattan used to look like. And what we believe is that the one on the left should function like the one on the right, and that our cities should do at least as well as the ecosystem that was there before we were there. We're incredibly intelligent. We should figure out how to perform in the same way as these beautiful systems do. And so we have this thing called ecological performance standards. And what we do is we literally, as biologists, we go to areas like we're doing this in a place called Lavasa in India. We go and we say, okay, what used to be there was a moist deciduous forest, and it cleans this much water, it builds this much soil, it sweetens this much air each year, and the city has to do the same thing. That's the new metric. The new metric is we're learning literally from the forest. And it's not just that we plant more trees. It's that we ask our buildings to do the same things and our streets to do the same things. And it's changed the way we design completely. We look at the 25 ecosystem services that a city performs, and we say, our city has to do this. That an ecosystem performs, and we say our city has to do the same thing. So it's a new kind of metric that nature sets the standard.